Please welcome to the stage Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, current ranking member of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee.
Senator, how are you?
Good morning.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Big day on Capitol Hill. Thanks for joining us, because I know you got a leadership race, you got a lot of transition stuff going on. How does it all feel? I'll ask you the same question. What happened last week? What was your read on it? Obviously, maybe a different take than the congressman.
Bob, I would tell you that I'm not anxious to leave, so you can take this long if you'd like. What's going on in the Capitol is certainly interesting, but it becomes very personal for those in the room. But delighted to be back in Washington, D.C. for purposes of reorganizing the Congress. My take on the election is there are just a lot of Americans out there who feel like themselves, their families, their kids and grandkids aren't as well off as they want them to be. They're concerned about kind of the values that are pushed upon them. And it also, I would say that my take from this election is that the prognosticators, the pollsters, the analysts didn't have a very good clue of what was going on in the country. And there's just a lot of people out there who speak when they voted, and seem somewhat important for us to be paying attention to. I shouldn't say somewhat, that sounds too lessening, but we ought to be paying attention to what people, I think, say when they vote. And I hope that Republicans and Democrats, it doesn't mean that needs to continue to be this continual divide. I hope we work together and hope we find solutions to problems. And I do think that the best opportunity for a person to be reelected if they're already in office is to do their jobs well. And that generally means, certainly in the Senate, where it takes 60 votes to do something, it means that you're going to work together with other people to try to get a result. Results are not often, I'll talk about this whenever we get to veterans issues, but it seems to me that too often we do things that are introducing pieces of legislation, and we have a press conference and we announce the legislation, but we don't always get those bills passed. We get the credit for the event,
right? But
we don't follow through and actually get the legislation passed, and that's just the first step. The other part, I would say, is the American people also deserve that the legislation has been implemented and is working, and we're paying attention to those things. So a message from the election, from my perspective, is that Americans ought to come together. They ought to work to solve problems, and a lot of people feel like we haven't been doing that.
Just last question on the Trump transition. What do you think of his appointment so far? Everyone is talking about Pete Hegseth to head the Pentagon. What's your view of Mr. Hegseth?
I pay a lot of attention to defense issues. I'm a defense appropriator, and I look forward to having a conversation and about his confirmation. But I would tell you that I've worked with Pete, with the nominee, on veterans issues over a long period of time, and he's been very helpful, and we have a good relationship. And so I'm very pleased to what I know about him and my past experience in working with him, and I look forward to that conversation.
You are the longest, and this is a great factoid, longest serving lawmaker on Veteran Affairs Committee, going all the way back to the House to 1996. That was a year before I came to Washington. That's a long time. What have you learned from all those?
You should be politer than to say that's what you just said.
Well, I'm killing myself too.
I'm not a veteran, which is perhaps to my detriment in my relationships with those who advocate for them. But I was in high school at the time the Vietnam War was coming to an end. If you were a year older than me, certainly 2 years older than me, you served in Vietnam. And I saw how my own high school classmates were treated upon their return, saw how Americans were treated upon their return on the news. And just as a 16-year-old kid, I'm saying, this isn't right, and I'm going to do everything I can to pay my respect, express my gratitude, and try to compensate for what I saw. And so when I came to Congress, there was nothing that would suggest I was going to be in Congress, so I never envisioned the rest of this. But I asked to serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee. When I came to the Senate, I asked for the same thing. In the House, I chaired the subcommittee that was responsible for health care issues for veterans. We don't have subcommittees in the Senate. And I was the chairman of the Veterans Committee once before for about a year upon the departure of Johnny Isaacson. And then I've been the ranking member under Senator Tester, or beside Senator Tester, and now potentially become I wouldn't want to leave any doubt about that, become the chairman of the Veterans
I think you're
Affairs
going to be
Committee.
chairman. Congratulations. Let's talk about what will be the agenda. Obviously, this committee operates more in a bipartisan fashion than most.
We have, and we do, and I certainly, I think my reputation would suggest that would be the case, at least my efforts as we go into the new year and the new Congress. And of all places that we should be bipartisan, it would be the Veterans Affairs Committee. And there are very few issues that really should divide us on partisan lines. And I say, the agenda is continuing to do many of the things that we've already done. And I would go back to what I said earlier, implementation. The PACT Act was a great success. It can be even a better success. It all depends upon its implementation. And we need to be providing the oversight that is necessary to make sure the department does things right. My general focus on issues on veterans in the Veterans Affairs Committee really revolves around what you would call, as a member of Congress, casework. And that is what I know about what's going on in veterans' lives, certainly is from the witnesses and the testimony and the hearings that we have, but it really comes from home. When I meet somebody, they stop me, they tell me what's going on in their life. I visit VA hospital. We have 3 VA hospitals in Kansas. I visit them on a frequent basis, outpatient clinics, CBOCs. But mostly it's just the mail, the emails and conversations. And I just was, of course, at Veteran Day event, and the stories that people tell me about where they're not getting what they need or where they're slipping through the cracks is really where we focus. And one of the things that it is difficult to change the VA broadly, and one of the satisfactions that come from what I do or what most of us do in regard to veterans is pretty frequently we can solve a veteran's problem. But when you solve a veteran's problem doesn't mean you solve the problem for everybody else who may very well have a similar kind of problem that the veteran that's talking to me has. And so the question is, how do you turn making this circumstance better, not just for the person who happened to run into me or happened to have the fortitude to call and write and seek out our staff, but then the person who didn't do that gets left behind because we just solved one problem, one case, one person at a time. And that's a great thing, and it gives you satisfaction. But we need to be able to change the system so that if there's a problem that's here, you address it, you address everybody else's problem. But our agenda will, again, be implementation of acts. I mean, I am an author of the Mission Act. It's one that I care a lot about. And it's perhaps in part because of when I was a congressman in the House, being a member of the Veterans Affairs Committee, I represented a congressional district the size of the state of Illinois. There is no VA hospital in that congressional district. And so distance, the rural nature of Kansas, the rural nature of many places in the country, lend me to be very interested in finding ways for veterans to access care at home or closer to home. And so Mission Act will be front and center. It's we've had challenges, in my view, with the Department of Veterans Affairs in the way they interpret it, and they've had overt and covert, at least what I see, as trying to reduce the role that the Mission Act plays in veterans' lives. And I want to make sure that the law is followed. Not that they do something that is too much the other way, not trying to privatize the VA, but do not have a bias against community care if the veteran chooses community care. And in that Mission Act, it says one of the ways you can get care in the community is if it's in your best interest. Best interest defined by you and your provider. And that's not a decision for somebody at the Department of Veterans Affairs to make. It's a healthcare issue to be decided by a veteran and his or her provider. We were involved in the John Q. Hannon Act, mental health. I heard a bit of what was said before I arrived. I mean, I think a main issue that we face in that regard is just the lack of healthcare professionals, mental health care professionals. And we can have all kinds of programs and policies, but unless we have people to fill the positions. And so, I mean, we'll just work our way through, and we'll have hearings. I'll be talking to my Republican colleagues. I'll be talking to my Democratic colleagues about what their agenda, what they want to see on our committee. We'll be talking to the veteran service organizations. We'll be talking to veterans at home in Kansas. And that agenda will evolve over based upon what we hear. But I also can tell you that most recently, we got consumed by trying to fix the budgetary issues for the PACT Act. The VA claimed that they were $3 billion short, and if we didn't get it fixed, veterans would not receive their benefits in the 1st of September. It turns out that they miscalculated. It wasn't right. There wasn't a problem. They didn't need the money. They still indicate there's $12 billion in healthcare needs of veterans that are unmet. But we need to make sure that they justify, verify, and certainly we've insisted that they explain how they got in this position of underestimating their budget. You could spend your whole time on the Veterans Committee trying to get the VA's administration to work better.
Who is going to be your counterpart? Obviously, Senator Tester lost his reelection bid. Who's going to be the ranking member to your chairmanship?
I don't know. We have a long line, of course, of Democrats on the other side of that aisle. The one that the first three, I think have already either, they may have served. I don't know that they're termed out. I don't know exactly what the Democratic rules are. But they're going to be chairmen, in this case, ranking members of other committees. So I think you get to Senator Blumenthal at the place in which this conversation first starts, and it become an understanding, which I don't have, of the rules of the Democratic caucus about how many ranking member positions he could have. And then you work your way. I think Senator Hirono is next. I think perhaps the least senior, and incidentally, we're losing two really good members of the Veterans Committee on the Democratic side, Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin. I wish they were there. But I think maybe the end maybe is Angus King, who again, even if you got to that point in seniority on the Democratic side of our committee, Angus King would be a great ranking member as well.
It is complicated, but you think that it'll be, regardless of the changes, the bipartisanship will continue?
Every intention on my part is to see that that's the case.
Well, Senator, I know you've got a big day. Thank you for joining us. Please thank the Senator for joining
You're
us.
welcome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Senator. Well done. Well done. Oh, no, that's fine.
I've lost my voice.
Well,